Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All coming to you from Austin, Texas. I'm going to do a kind of a hot take on Elon talking at the Tesla shareholder meeting. I was very privileged to be there, of course, and a big thank you to Michael for getting me the +1. It was amazing. Didn't get a chance to ask a question this year, but I had a really good one in mind. So unfortunately, I'll have to save it for next time, I guess. But anyway, I want to talk through specifically, as you probably see, I'm scrolling through a bunch of tweets here, or posts, excuse me. And let me blow this up a little bit. But basically, I want to talk through the AI end of things. So Optimus, full self-driving, all of that kind of stuff, because there was a lot of really interesting information that came out during this. So let's see if we start here. Okay, so we'll just start here. I'm going to read it backwards because, of course, I was like putting out these tweets as I was watching this, so it's kind of backwards of what this goes. So I'm going to go through the posts and then I'm going to sort of just, I don't know, discuss that. Again, hot take real quick, but I think it was absolutely fascinating to hear what he had to say about this. So number one, Elon, we do a lot of software at Tesla. Tesla is a much more a software company, as much a software company as a hardware company. So think about it as like 50-50 or something like that. That's basically what he said. It's like 50% hardware, 50% software. Interestingly enough, that puts them in the league of a company like Apple or something, right? Because you think often about Apple as a hardware company, but of course they make the software that runs this thing and the computer and all of that kind of stuff. So a similar sort of thing, but then Tesla also makes the software that runs the factory as well. So I would say they're probably almost more a software company than a hardware company, but very, very interesting. So next one up, Tesla is the leader in real-world AI. This is a big deal. Nobody is even close, and it's getting better every month or even every week. So what he's talking about here is the fact that there's a lot of people that do large language models. There's people that do all kinds of various things with vision models and stuff like that, but those are generally based on video. Like it might read in this video of me and output some video or a transcript or a summary or something like that. And yeah, there's a lot of companies that do that, but in terms of actually moving through space and actually creating something like a car that can drive through space, or eventually a humanoid robot that can walk through space. And we do know that there are two Optimi. Apparently they are in Fremont, although the person who was giving me the factory tour today said that there were a couple in Austin, Texas as well. So it's possible that there may be multiple ones of these. But anyway, the ones from the people who did the factory tour with Franz and Elon today, lucky folks, they said that the Optimus, the two Optimus that are working, the Adam and Eve, whatever, those are in the Fremont factory right now, which makes sense because it's close to Palo Alto. And I would guess from the video that they showed of a pick and place that it's picking up 4680 batteries at probably the Cato Road pilot line, putting it into a tray, and then maybe the other one is carrying the tray, or maybe they have two stations of it doing that. So anyway, very interesting about that. And of course, Elon says here, this is a big deal. It's a big deal for Tesla shareholders. It's a big deal for Tesla as a company because this is something that there's not a lot of competition in. There's a lot of competition in the large language model space, diffusion model space, generative AI space, things like that. Even Apple has gotten into the game now, of course, as we were very famously told at WWC. If you haven't seen my video on that, I'll put it up here and also at the end of this video so you can check it out. But anyway, in terms of actually like things moving through space, it's a big deal. And Elon talked about, I didn't really tweet about this or post about this, but Elon mentioned the fact that it's very difficult for other robotics companies to catch up with this because they don't have the manufacturing prowess that Tesla does. And if they don't have the manufacturing prowess, they are unable to create these things at scale, which means that they're not able to collect the data. They're not able to build it cheaply enough to be competitive with Tesla. So he feels like Optimus is going to be a very, very big deal. So anyway, pay attention to this. Also, he noted, I can't remember where this is. It may be before this actually, but I'll just talk about it. He said that at scale, so he's not saying it'll be a while, but at scale that Optimus will cost somewhere on the order of $10,000. So consider that an order of magnitude. Could be 9,500, could be 12,800, something like that. But anyway, order of magnitude $10,000 to build and then $20,000 to sell it. That puts it, well in range, not of everyone by any means, but that puts it well in range of a lot of people. And that means that humans, normal humans like people as opposed to companies could buy this. Now, of course, when he's talking about scale, we're talking about, and he talks about numbers a little bit later on, and the numbers get nutty. But as he talks about scale, the scale of the bot is it's going to go to factories first. It's going to go to people who can probably pay much more money at first because it's going to be much more expensive at first. So it's going to take a time to get there. So don't expect the Optimus to be in your house next year. But Elon did say it's kind of creepy, or not creepy. He said it's really wild to be working in Palo Alto, sitting at his desk at a cubicle or something, and all of a sudden an Optimus bot just walks by. And he's like, that's it's wild. But it's the same kind of thing. When you first saw a Tesla, I remember back in 2012, 2013, when the Model S came out, it was like, dang, look at that. There's a Model S, there's a Tesla. And then of course that became commonplace. And now it's like the Cybertruck is the same thing. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's a Cybertruck. And now it's like, well, Cybertruck's getting more and more commonplace. So, eventually we're just going to have these humanoid bots walking around and we won't even think about it. So really crazy. Next, very interesting. Elon did say, with all due respect to NVIDIA, and again, I was just typing this out fast, but he said even chips from NVIDIA, there's not a chip from NVIDIA or anybody else that we would prefer to put in our car over our hardware. And he was touting how good Tesla's hardware is. So that actually gets us to the next post here, which I will bring up in full. So he said later this year, so currently, if you don't know, hardware for cars, the modern cars that have the faster chips, more memory, and the better cameras are running in emulation of hardware 3 mode. So he said later this year, they're going to separate hardware 4 to do its own training, to create its own fork, and that's going to be at the south side of Giga Texas, which is being constructed right now. It's beautiful. It's absolutely huge windows and stuff. It's going to be absolutely amazing. But there's going to be that 50,000 H100s, like the insane number of NVIDIA chips. So I don't think NVIDIA has any worries, because even if Tesla's not using it in their cars, they're buying plenty of their stuff for their training. But anyway, they're putting that in South Texas. They're going to start training hardware 4 on this. So I think it's kind of, when they split off hardware 4 is going to be contingent on when those new chips come about. But they're going to have to do a whole new fork, and hardware 4 is going to be unloosed. He said a couple of times, I think he said uncorked was the word he used. So they're going to uncork hardware 4. It's going to be amazing. So he made a note that hardware 4 is 3 to 8 times better than hardware 3. Sorry, that should be than hardware 3. Hardware 4 will do. Hardware 4 is, I'm not exactly sure. Hardware 4 is going to be 5 times better than hardware 3. I don't know exactly what that means there. Anyway, so whatever that means. Oh, I guess whatever. It just has to do with the fact that hardware 3 is currently the main thing, right? That's what we have. Even if you have a hardware 4 car, it's running an emulation. It's actually not doing as well as if it was running on hardware 3. But when hardware 4 is uncorked, it'll be 5 times better than hardware 3. But when hardware 5 comes out, and they're calling it AI 5, that's the new name. They're not going to call it hardware 5 anymore. That's going to come out in about 18 months, so a year and a half. So call it 2024, 2025, 2026, like right around the end of 2025, beginning of 2026. That will be 10 times better than hardware 4. So that's going to be amazing. And of course, the same for Optimus. They're going to use those chips in Optimus. And they're very power efficient. He did talk about this. It's a big deal that these, most places, they're not worried about power, but Tesla is always worried about power. So hardware 3 and 4 are about 300 watts. Hardware, or AI 5, sorry, can go up to 700 watts, but will do so only when needed. And with 100 million vehicles, eventually, with 1 kilowatt approximately of efficient inference compute, that's around 100 gigawatts of inference compute. And he said, what do you think we should use it for? And then obviously use it for inference. And he said, well, why not use it for inference, because that's the thing that you want to do. So those are some crazy numbers. That's hardware. That's not even software. That's just amazing as well. So like I said, Elon said it's a pretty significant opportunity for inference compute, and nobody is taking account of it, including ARK Invest. Man, if people are not like looking at ARK Invest's fund really, really hard, I thought it was like all he did all day. It was like he was like pumping ARK Invest. He was like, they did such a great job, and they really did. Their analysis is amazing. Definitely check that out. But he was just like, their analysis is great, but they're not even taking account of Optimus, and they explicitly exclude Optimus because they said more like 2030 before it's going to have a big effect. But that's going to be a big deal when Optimus comes out. So yeah, and the inference compute as well. Nobody's taking account of that. I don't even think ARK Invest even mentioned that. But inference compute, like AWS for Amazon, could be huge for Tesla. So that's an amazing thing. All right, the limiting factor, this is like maybe the key thing, the key takeaway I had from today. The limiting factor for full self-driving is the interventions are so rare that we can't tell which version is better. This is where a giant fleet is so important. We can run it in shadow mode, compare the two, and compare the delta to assess over billions of miles the difference. Not possible to solve full self-driving without millions of miles on the road. So, okay. So number one, the problem is that if you go 1,000 miles without a safety critical intervention, even with a lot of cars on the road, it becomes very difficult because you just don't have that many vehicles on the road. And the problem is that, let's say you train a model and then you train a model. So you have A and you have B, and you're like, which one is better? Well, in the old days, you just put it at a benchmark or you drive it a couple hundred miles and it would become really obvious which one was better. The problem is now you don't know. It's just they're so darn good that it's really hard to tell which version is actually better. So you need those millions of miles. And you do it in shadow mode, which means you compare it to what the human drivers are and stuff. He didn't talk about this today. I really wanted to ask him. I was in line, unfortunately, was a few people behind, the ones that got to ask questions. But it's a question of, at this point, are the humans even the ground truth anymore? Because humans are not perfect drivers by any means. So eventually the car is going to have to ignore the human input. But it sounds like right now they still are using human input. I'm sure only from the best drivers. But they do take account of human input and they figure out which one, the delta, what he's talking about is the difference between human driver and what the car would have decided to do for version A of the software and version B of the software. Then they use whichever one turns out to be the best version. So very interesting information about that. That's the limiting factor. It's no longer compute, it's actually miles driven. They need many, many more miles driven, which explains, of course, the free full self-driving and the cheaper full self-driving, because they want to get it out there. So Elon, of course, said we're building a new training center for Hardware 4. We're going to uncork the full capabilities of Hardware 4. And that is in Texas as opposed to in Palo Alto. So really interesting. I don't know if they're going to move some of the team there or if that will just be remotely available for them to use from Palo Alto. But really interesting that they've moved a gigantic cluster from one state to another. Power requirements, all sorts of other things dictate that it probably makes sense, but it is something that is very, it's going to be disruptive a little bit. But again, most of the time when you're using training compute, although it is a lot of data, I don't know. Some of the team is going to have to move to Texas to deal with all the throughput, the bottlenecks. The hardware team is going to have to be there. So I don't know how that's going to work, but it will be very interesting to see how that works in terms of the team splitting between Austin and Palo Alto. So he said 12.4 is a whole different version than 12.3. 12.5 is a whole different version than 12.4. That is he said, think about it as 3.4.5 instead of .3.4.5. Just think this is like version 3 of the software that we're driving right now. The one that's just coming out is version 4. One that's coming out after that, version 5. One that's coming out. So he's just like, think of that, remove the dot and just assume that. So interesting how that works. So Tesla said with the software, this is really interesting. He said with the software update, it will allow the Tesla fleet. So he very, very explicitly talked about us drivers here, us owners of vehicles, will have an Uber plus Airbnb autonomous driving. So in his mind, Uber is Tesla and the Cybercab, the robo-taxi. They'll own that themselves. They'll drive it themselves. They'll take all the money, whatever, and then the rest of the fleet, the Model 3s, Model Ys, etc., that people have, that will be more like an Airbnb, where you're like, yeah, I'll rent it out today. I won't rent it out tomorrow. I want to leave it. I'm going on vacation for a week, so my car's going to make me money while I'm gone, right? Because my car actually costs me money while I'm on vacation because it sits in a parking garage and gets charged $12 a day. Way better if the car was making a couple $100s a day while I was gone, while I was driving around and doing things. So, that's the kind of thing. So you can pick as a user, just go into the app, just like an Airbnb. If you've ever used Airbnb as a host, you just pick which days you're blocked off, how much money you're going to charge for the other things. It suggests to you what the charges should be. Same thing with Tesla's whatever they're going to call it, their Cybercab fleet or something. But that's really, really cool. It's great to hear this again because I worry that I had worried that we would eventually get cut out and we wouldn't be able to make any money off of this, because that was one of the promises of the autonomous full self-driving. And it sounds like that's definitely going to be part, and it's in the cards, it's in the plan. So that's really, really cool. And it's going to be like that, right? With the software update, you can do it. You can throw a switch. So this is where Elon said, pretty wild to be in Palo Alto and see Optimus walk by. So that's very, very cool. Again, I guess I must have, the 10,000 and 20,000 post must have been down below. I must have missed that. But anyway, he definitely said that. He said that he thinks at scale on the order of $10,000 to manufacture, $20,000 to sell it, and talked about selling it, not just leasing it and renting it and stuff. So that's going to be really cool too. So hopefully we'll get those in the next 4, 5, 6 years, something like that. Elon also said concerning Optimus, we have one major hardware upgrade at the end of the year. So they're on version 2 of Optimus. So they're going to go to version 3. Then it's limited production. My prediction is next year we'll have 1,000 or more Optimi working at Tesla. You can talk to it or show it a video and it'll learn that task. That was huge as well. that is, I just talked about this in a post with Jim Fan. He posted something, and he was showing how humans can like use somebody else's point of view to like move around in a space, because we can transfer, we can do the transform, we can transform the transform, we can transform our spatial stuff from one place to another, and we can understand that. And Optimus, in order to learn something from us, needs to be able to have a third person point of view, right? So if I, pick up this bottle and I say, this is how you pick up a bottle, I can teleoperate it and put myself inside the body and teach it that way, but that's very inefficient and not the way humans learn, right? If I told you that, you would then go and figure it out. You just look at what I did and you'd figure it out, because you can make this coordinate transform. That's what I was looking for. You can make a coordinate transform from my point of view to your point of view, and you can understand how that would work. So if Optimus can do that, that means it can learn from video, because it can look at the third party sort of point of view of the video, and then it can figure out how to do that. Or it can look at a person, they can show them, or you can tell it if it has enough experience, it can understand. So this is really, really huge news here, right? There's a lot of really big sort of Easter eggs that were dropped. They just all went by so fast, I think most people missed it. But also the 1,000 Optimi, limited production, all of that kind of stuff. Let's see, so a couple of more here. Elon then predicted that the ratio of human robots to humans will be greater than 1-to-1, and Tesla will be a leader. He was very definite about that. He thinks that they're going to take a big chunk of this. And this is where he started talking about how difficult it is to make that. But if you think about that, greater than 1-to-1 means more than 8 billion of these things eventually. That's the kind of numbers we're talking about. So it's a huge market, absolutely huge. And he said in order to make Optimus work, we had to design everything from first principles, build the actuators, build the neural networks, all of that kind of stuff had to be built up. They didn't have anything off the shelf they could buy. And that's what Tesla specializes at. So that's why they're so good at it. Next generation Optimus will have 22 degrees of freedom and can play the piano. That is huge. And that was confirmed by his private tour with Franz and Elon and the folks that got to go on that they talked about that, and that there's going to be a seventh actuator in the middle of the hand that will allow it to go like this. It won't be able to control just like one finger like this. It's only going to be like this. So it'll be like, I guess probably just these fingers, but wide closed. And then of course these guys like this, thumb like this, thumb like this. So it'll have those degrees of freedom, 22 degrees of freedom. I think 7 actuators is what Scott was telling me. So anyway, this is going to be really, really cool. The hand is going to be amazing. That will be part of Gen 3 at the end of this year that we will see sometime December, January, sometime in that range. So that will be just amazing. And then he said, even the most optimistic reviews underestimate the value of Optimus. Optimus is a $25 trillion opportunity. You put a PE of even 10 on that, you're looking at a company that would be worth $250 trillion. I mean, it just kind of dwarfs things. And Elon did say that, he said there's a remote possibility that they could be worth 10x more than the most valuable company today, which is on the order of $2 trillion, sorry. 10x of that would be about $20 trillion. So that's the kind of numbers we're talking about, folks, and I kind of hope that happens because I'm holding onto my stock. Always, as always, not stock advice, but I think that's pretty cool to think about those kind of insane numbers. And then Elon said, he did talk about, like, somebody asked a question afterwards, if the car, gets stuck driving down a blind alleyway or something like that, how are you going to deal with that? I've been saying for a very long time, they're just going to have some people somewhere in a room, and they will have joysticks just like a game controller, and they'll drive out of the situation and get it back in. And so Elon basically confirmed that. He said if it's something like it gets stuck in a blind alley or something and it can't get out, he said it'll phone home like ET. It'll phone home for help and will remote drive it like an RC car. So number one, that means joystick controls just like an RC car. Number two, it means that it will proactively call out. So you won't have to have somebody monitoring it all the time. It will be smart enough to know, like, uh-oh, I'm stuck. I can't get out of this situation. It'll phone home. ET will phone home. There will be a group of people, which will probably start fairly large, right? You'll have a lot of people relative to the number of vehicles that are out there, because you've got to cover a lot of incidents potentially. And then as it gets better and better and better, they'll reduce the staff of that until finally they just basically don't need anybody else. And this will be a way of getting that safety critical intervention information. Elon didn't talk about the Cybercam reveal day. He didn't talk about that at all. That will be on August 8th, so I'm sure he was saving a lot of that information, but indirectly we found out a lot of information about that. I'm still fairly convinced that we are going to eventually see or at the event, that we have a really good chance of seeing actual like autonomous vehicle rides, that they're going to try to get local governmental approval to do that. And both San Francisco and Austin, which are the two leading candidates for where this would happen, they're very kind to autonomous driving in terms of regulation. So it should probably work very well. Okay, so anyway, that's the highlights in terms of the AI-ness and all of that stuff. Full self-driving, Optimus, very, very exciting. Of course, I will try to break down some of these topics more, but I wanted to get a hot take kind of thing. And I hope everybody enjoyed this. If you did, please do like and subscribe. It really, really helps. I appreciate it very much. Tell your friends about it, all that good stuff. And hello to everybody that I met today at the shareholder meeting. It was amazing. I'm going to Luster Pearl right now. We are going to go to the after party. And yeah, peace, everybody. Have a great evening and a great morning, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.